Hey, what's going on, everybody? Let's talk about Miami baseball. Big series coming up. We've got our Cory Smith here from PackPride and the 24/7 Sports Network to talk about NC State. Covers the Wolfpack. So we're going to get into this big series. NC State, number 13 in the country. Both teams, they're the hottest teams in the ACC.
Yeah.
Miami comes in winning 8 straight ACC games. NC State 7. That's the best in the conference there. Those are the two hottest teams, both 9-1 in their last 10 games. Looking at the stats here, Cory, we're gonna get into this. What's been working well for both programs, and we'll get into the series. We'll break it down, hitting and pitching and things like that. But Miami, they're doing well. They're keeping the scores down. Only 40 runs allowed during that time. They've got 6 straight games, 4 runs or less that they've allowed in this ACC run that they're on. Kind of just really reversing everything. 11-2 start in ACC play since that 1-2 start. 11-2 since then. So 1-7 at the beginning. Now they're 11-2 overall. NC State scoring runs. They gave up that 25 run game, but they're keeping runs down too. What's been working well lately for NC State here? What are they doing well coming off that big series against the big series sweep against Clemson? They're ranked 2 at the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really just playing a complete game. Part of the issue for NC State early on in the season was, they would put up a good amount of runs one game and then wouldn't be able to consistently carry that over. Or, they would get a guy like Dom Fritton, who's your Friday ace, or, Ryan Marone, who's the Sunday guy for them. They would pitch really well. And then, they'd end up losing a game because, they only gave up 1 run, but NC State wasn't able to get anything. And then, they give up runs late with the bullpen. So, NC State's just playing a more complete game. Alex Sosa's been coming on recently, which is their catcher. He's been hitting over 400 the last 6 games. I just wrote a story about that the other day. He's hitting has over 1,000 slugging percentage over the last 3 series for NC State. Has 4 home runs over that stretch, and then you look at several other guys in this lineup. Braden Fraseman had 8 hits over the course of 2 games, a 5-for-5 performance against Clemson on Thursday that led to that run rule victory for them. He had 2 home runs in that game. So and then you have other guys like Ty Head, that's the starting freshman for them, that's usually at the top of the lineup. He leads the team in walks, and I think he's top 5 in the ACC in walks so far this season. Guys like that just getting consistently on base and then hitting around to be able to bring them in. That's what NC State's just been doing so well here recently. And these are two teams that were just essentially, I was just talking to Aaron Fitt right before this, two teams that were essentially left for dead midway through the ACC season, and for both of them to kind of have this resurgence and be NC State at the very top of the ACC and Miami on the cusp of being there. I think that tells you a lot about the depth of the ACC and how good this league is too.
It's also a reminder of how long a season is. 30 games in
Yeah.
this conference. And we've seen this, and I tried to remind people early on, Miami fans, and a lot of impatience right now with the Miami program and wanting them to get back and not just get to the tournament. They're trying to do that, but kind of be one of those top 16 teams again, kind of host regionals, consistently make a run at the College World Series like NC State did last year. A team that's been to the College World Series the last few years in this span. So Miami, it was top heavy with the difficulty of their schedule, and that's tough to handle from a fan base, from everybody that's involved with the program. That it will ease up a little bit, and I think we're seeing some of that. In addition to all these transfers and everybody just kind of getting into a better groove. Daniel Cuvée, you touched on some hot players for NC State. Daniel Cuvée, comes in an ACC Player of the Year candidate coming in. Had a huge season last year as a freshman. Slow start coming into it, but his last 12 games, hitting 391, 24 RBIs, 6 doubles, a triple, and 5 homers. He actually had the game-winning RBI in all 3 of their games at Boston College. A couple big hits late in the 8th inning in 2 of those games. So he's coming on. That's helping Miami there. But with NC State, can you talk more about their lineup? Cory, you touched on some guys and what's working well and how they're all kind of fitting together here. Again, both teams have 9 games left in the ACC. You touched on NC State, coming on strong here. They're in position, the way it looks. I know they got some tough games coming up, but they're looking for that first regular season ACC title since '86. So we'll see if they can kind of get it done. But in the lineup, with how they're hitting, what's going well for the Wolfpack?
Yeah, Chris McHugh, transfer from VCU from last year. He's been one of those consistent forces for NC State so far this season. At one point was hitting over 400 on the season. Now he's at 374, but still, over 1,000 OPS, on base plus slugging percentage so far this season. You look at what he's been able to do, the 7 home runs that he's had this season, 44 RBIs, which leads NC State too. he's just been a consistent force for NC State. It's been finding guys around him that can consistently perform too. Braden Fraseman that I talked about earlier on, former JUCO guy that came over to NC State, wasn't talked about a lot before the season, but as you saw the outfield kind of getting figured out, the infield kind of getting figured out, he was one of those guys that was like, all right, he's going to be in the lineup on a consistent basis for NC State. He's played over 40 games so far this season as well. And again, hitting over 300. The slugging percentage has been strong all season long as well, hitting nearly 600 on the season. And then, like I said earlier, Alex Sosa, the catcher for NC State. Like it had gotten so bad for him that in the Duke series, he was actually taken out of the lineup. Elliot Avon pulling him from a game, and then the very next weekend, very next game that he played in ACC play, had three doubles. Figures it out against Louisville. Or actually, I take that back. That was the Virginia series that he struggled in and was taken out of. But they still won that series. Then the very next weekend against Louisville, now against like I said, the last two series, he's been hitting over 400 on the season, or for the last 6 games, and led to NC State having a 6-game winning streak. Another guy to kind of point out here too. There was a lot of talk about him before the season, but Josh Hogue, the health of him, was he going to be fully healthy? Was he going to be able to play on a consistent basis? And the answer has been yes. He's been, moved around the lineup quite a bit, but a guy that's played over 40 games after coming off of a really bad broken leg last season. There was some thought that he might not even be ready for the beginning of the season, and he's been a consistent bat for them in the lineup. 9 home runs on the season. He's been getting going recently too, and I think that's been huge for NC State. Justin DeCrizio, Luke Nixon, 2 other guys to know. I mentioned Ty Head, a true freshman for NC State, but throughout the season, he's been the guy's drawn 43 walks on the year in 40 games. So when you're talking about a true freshman and the plate discipline that it takes to be able to do the things that he's been able to do, he's helped NC State in a major way too.
And just looking at Miami's lineup of, it's a lineup that's not scored a bunch of runs. They're 14th in conference play in runs per game at 5.5. Look, NC State's 4th right now at 7.8, but Miami's, finding a way to kind of get some runs across. And we'll get more into their pitching here in a little bit. But, Jake Ogden, I touched on Cuvée. He's obviously the centerpiece of this lineup. And whenever you have a guy like Cuvée, it just helps so much. He can elevate your lineup, like we saw last weekend against Boston College, where a guy like that can deliver in big spots and kind of rack up the extra base hits, as you're mentioning with some of the NC State players and the RBIs, and the home runs are starting to come a little bit, just at 10 right now, obviously off the pace from hitting 24 last year. But he's a guy that's coming into his own, and you can win games with a guy like that. Jake Ogden, their leadoff hitter, a shortstop. He's a guy that is certainly a very important player for them, starting to rack up some doubles. His OPS is getting close to that 900 mark, which you always like to see, hitting 330 there. Has 10 steals, so he can kind of provide a little bit of some speed aspect. But those guys are both right-handed bats. And for Miami, especially with Derek Williams, look, this is a guy that's led the team in hitting before he was injured. The OPS led the team. A guy that was racking up doubles and doing really well, especially when he got hurt. So he had a hand injury and so he's been out since April 12th. The hamate, as it was reported, he actually showed up as a pinch runner, but he's a guy that they certainly would like to have in the lineup, another right-handed bat, and with those guys in Ogden and Cuvée as right-handed bats, then it goes into a lot of left-handed hitters. And this is where I find it's going to be interesting against NC State with their starting pitching. Miami just 7-8 against left-handed starters. They've got a lot of left-handed bats, especially at the bottom half of the order, and I think they're going to need to get hits, not just in this series, but just kind of moving forward against left-handed pitchers. And they've done a little bit better job lately, but I think that is going to be a key, again, not just for this series because of what NC State has with his starting rotation, but also moving forward. But there's some other guys kind of coming on and doing well a little bit too, kind of providing a little bit of a spark. Max Galvin's a guy last summer, a left fielder who I thought was going to have a big year. He doesn't have the numbers that you would expect or that I expected after that big summer in the Northwoods League, not the highest level of leagues, but he just filled it up. And I think he's a guy to kind of maybe a little bit of an X factor, can get a couple hits, not a big extra base guy, but certainly a key guy for Miami's lineup. As I mentioned, we're going to get into this pitching. Let's start with the starting rotation with NC State. You touched on Fritton and Marone there, the kind of the Friday Sunday guy. Heath Andrews there in the middle of the right-hander. It's obviously ideal when you have a rotation that is essentially start to finish. These are your guys. But what can you say about these guys and how they've been pitching?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting too because Marone and Dom Fritton, both left-handed pitchers. Marone 6'2", so he's got the body frame. Dom Fritton 6'1", so you've got some bigger pitchers. For NC State, and two guys that really have shown their best stuff here in recent weekends. Heath Andrews struggled in the Cal series, and that was something that he needed to bounce back from. The guy that's going to be pitching on Saturday for NC State, but you look back to what he did this past weekend. Heath Andrews, the only right-hander in this rotation, what he was able to do against Clemson, one of the better offenses in the ACC and in the country, and he was able to shut them down for, I believe, 6 innings, or no, actually almost 8 innings in that game. So what you're able to get from those guys has been really solid for NC State, and then the interesting element here too, like the bullpen has been really good for NC State, but a major part of that has been the fact that a guy like Anderson Nance that can help you out if Heath Andrews doesn't have a good start or Dom Fritton doesn't have a good start. Those guys know that they can lean on several potential long bullpen relief guys that you have in that bullpen too. I don't know. I'm assuming you probably want to talk about the bullpen separately, but I just wanted to
No,
mention that
go ahead.
that's
Go ahead with
another
the
major.
bullpen. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say that's another major factor in all this too. Is you got two long relief possibilities. Anderson Nance is a guy that's only made 14 appearances so far this season, but he's still pitched in 43 innings. So like almost every time he's going in there, it's been for multiple innings. And he actually in the Cal series, you go back to that one, like NC State's able to sweep that series. They fell behind 6-0 early on in that game and still won at 7-6. And a major part of that was because Anderson Nance came out there. Cal's not a very good lineup overall, but they were getting hot in that game. He came out the last 5 innings and was absolutely perfect, literally perfect. Didn't allow a single hit, didn't allow a single run, didn't have a single walk that he allowed. So he went out there and NC State was able to climb back. So you get guys like that. Obviously, coming into the season, somebody like Jacob Duden, another right-hander for NC State out of the bullpen. The thought process going into the season was he's going to be the guy. He was rated by D1 Baseball as the #1 relief pitcher in the entire country, and didn't have his stuff early on in the season. They went down for the Jacks Baseball Classic. He got hit pretty hard there. I got hit pretty hard in a midweek game early on in the season as well, and didn't quite have his stuff. But he's been the guy for them late in games. So far this season, he has 5 saves. Andrew Schaffner also has 6 saves on the season. So you've got two guys at the end of this bullpen that you're like, all right, if we need somebody to go out there, those two guys both sub 3.1 ERAs on the season. So you feel really good about where those guys are late in games too.
Yeah, and just to add, with NC State ranked 7th right now in runs allowed per ACC game at 6.3. Again, some of those a little bit skewed with those heavy numbers in some of the games there. With Miami, that's been the strength of their team and why they've been able to have this run to kind of get back into it, kind of get into some NCAA tournament discussion. They're 3rd right now in runs allowed per an ACC game at 5.4. I touched on it earlier. They're just in this good stretch, not giving up a lot of runs to Georgia Tech. It was first place a couple of series ago, first place coming into the series, and Miami held them to 2 runs each game. So a high-powered offense doing well, and Miami did good, then did good against Boston College as well. They're just keeping the runs down. The pitching staff has gone through a little bit of a transformation mid-season, and that's really helped their team. It's tough to do for teams, especially if we get into some high-level conference play, but switching guys out of the rotation, relievers into the rotation, kind of switching that up, lengthening them out can be difficult, and just kind of adjusting to bullpen role. It goes both ways, but for Miami, it's worked really well. It's benefited the team. That's why they're doing so well. I just want to touch on Friday starter Griffin Hughes. He's a guy that's settled into that Friday role. Miami's 6-5 in his starts. He's a guy that can get strikeouts. His walks can get a little bit high, and his pitch count can get a little bit high. I think that'll be kind of the key. He went 6 innings last weekend, but I think just kind of keeping his pitch count down, has the strikeout stuff. He's been able to show that a lot of times throughout the season, regardless of who they're facing. But he doesn't have an individual win since April 4th. So he's the Friday night guy, kind of set the tone. We'll see how it goes. But the next two guys, and then this has been the key for Miami's season, both freshmen, right-handed pitchers, with AJ Siskar on Saturday and then Tate Darius on Sunday. Both of these guys getting rotation work now after coming out of the bullpen earlier in the year. But AJ Siskar 2-1, 2.88 ERA in 5 starts, and then Darius 2-0 in 4 starts with a 3.15 ERA. So both these guys, these right-handed pitchers, they might not go deep into games, although Siskar had a good outing last week, but giving them quality innings and keeping the team in the game has been so important. And then as they do that, they get these two guys in the starting rotation, pitching great. I've touched on it a number of times, but it's a great sign for the future. But right now it's a great sign because of how well they're pitching. Just two guys that have good stuff. They have some strikeout stuff that they can kind of get right-handed batters out with the way they throw away to the right-handed batters. But then, their closer, Brian Walters, started off the season, made 7 starts, ERA over 6. They move him not only to the bullpen, but they make him the closer. And he's been great, 6 for 6 in save opportunities, an ERA at .87. So he's done really well. They've done a really good job, and they're kind of middle relief guys. Carson Fisher kind of struggled a little bit at times, right-handed pitcher there, but now he's on a streak over 9 scoreless innings, just pitching really well. They're going to use him. He's a kind of a multiple inning guy. One thing to mention, Corey, you touched on some long inning stuff. I think this is something to watch for from Miami. They've got Reese Lumpkin. They didn't have a midweek game this week. He's been their midweek starter. And a couple weekends ago, I noticed that he warmed up on a Sunday in the bullpen. They didn't put him in, but I asked Coach Arteaga about that. Were you guys going to play him? Does that mean he wasn't going to start? He said, look, we would use him if we need him. We're kind of essentially an all hands on deck type of approach. And then we'll deal with, the midweek game when we deal with it. Miami does have a midweek game next week following the NC State series. But Lumpkin's a guy that I wouldn't be surprised if they throw him in the bullpen in this series if they feel like they need to get some quality innings. So he's kind of a name, and then they'll kind of essentially, like you said a couple weekends ago, they'll figure it out in the midweek game. But that's another arm that they could have in the bullpen that they've not had because he's been that midweek starter. Just your last your last thoughts here, Corey, on this series, kind of with where NC State is. We've touched on where they've gone, but kind of moving forward too, and what they're trying to kind of get back to, and kind of the importance of this series.
Yeah, one interesting thing I wanted to add too about the Miami starting rotation. I was looking up the stats earlier, and something that blew me away: the batting average allowed for all three of those guys, all three starters, is less than 217. So Tate Darius with a 217 batting average against is the highest of any of the starters, and then AJ Oscar 195. 195. So he's allowing less than 200 in terms of batting average on the season. Now, NC State was able to, one of the things I'll be watching for is one of the ways NC State has been able to win some of these games in ACC play has been chasing starters early. So, yes, and they faced some top line guys. I mean, and we're talking about, Thursday, the Friday game against Louisville, they were able to chase their top starter in that game, a guy that's, potential first, second round type of starter. And then the game that they had against Clemson this past Thursday were able to chase their top starter as well and be able to win that game 14-4. A major reason why was because they were able to get to the bullpen early on and be able to hit off of them. So I'm interested to see what they do in these first couple games because they've really been able to kind of bombard some of the better pitchers in the ACC early on by just frustrating them, like getting walks, getting guys across early on. And it might not necessarily be that they hit, 4 or 5 home runs or anything along those lines, but just being able to string together runs, I think is going to be one of the interesting things to watch for in this series. Is NC State able to do that against a team like Miami? And as well, you mentioned the fact that they might be able to have another guy on Sunday. The thing about it is they have, they don't have a midweek game this week, but they have FIU next Wednesday. That's a pretty solid difference in time there as well when you have 3-4 days in between your last game. So you might be able to still put anybody that you want out there. You might still have some healthy arms in this series. So Miami should have everybody probably available, I would assume, this coming up weekend in this series. And NC State's going to probably try to do the exact same thing. They go on the road against UNCW the following week on Tuesday, I believe, and then they have UNC the following weekend. So this is a trap series for NC State, I would say. You look at the overall standings and it's like, oh, NC State should win this series. But if you look at where both of these two teams have been over the last 4 series in ACC play, they both put themselves in great position heading into this weekend to try to come away with what could be, another kind of tide turning series in the ACC.
And yeah, with 10 games left in the regular season, Miami's sitting at 27-18 overall, the 12-9 in ACC play. And certainly this would be a big series win for Miami as they try to get into the tournament. We touched on the importance of, kind of getting to that 15-15 mark in ACC play or 16-14, just to give yourself a chance of making the tournament. So Miami's got to get some more wins. If they can win a series like this, that'd be great. Be able to kind of vault
Yep.
themselves even more, a little bit more of a breathing room. They've been playing catch up with all of this, from the standings, racking up wins, whatever it might be, just gaining momentum and perception of this team. And I think that that's what's so important to kind of keep this thing going. Difficult series, obviously, with what NC State's bringing to the table, but we'll see how it goes. Hopefully it's a good crowd. Hopefully the fans get on board, regardless of how things started at the beginning of the season. This is where Miami's at right now, 12-3 in their last 15 games. I do want to mention, I forgot to mention this, but going back to Miami's starting pitching with Siskar and Darius there, the two freshmen, Miami's 8-1 in the games they start. So again, that just shows their turnaround with what they've been able to do. And we'll see how it goes. Just touch on couple injury things real quick. First baseman Miami, Todd Hudson, hasn't played since April 15th because of the hand injury. I touched on Derek Williams being out, and then Nick Robert, starter, kind of moved to the bullpen, but elbow injury. He's out for the season, hasn't pitched since March. So a little bit of injury notes there. Cory, this is great. Looking forward to a fun series, college baseball. This is great stuff. A lot going on with both of our programs that we're following. We touched on it earlier before we started this, just the different sports with football, basketball, a lot of news all over the place, but I appreciate you taking the time to discuss college baseball here.
Yes, sir. And I want to personally apologize to Siskar, by the way. I said Oscar earlier and I read that wrong. So yeah, that was on me.
All good, all good. I'm sure I had mistakes too, and people can drop in the comments. But hopefully everybody enjoyed this because there's a lot of information. I'm looking at stats and trying to make
Yeah.
sure I get it all. And yeah, it's just interesting. And Miami again, 12-4 in April after that difficult March where they go 7-13. Great to see a turnaround, and we've seen it all the time in college baseball, teams that you might count out and you want to get hot. And this is exactly when you want to do it, regardless of how things have gone. So we'll see how these two teams, not just this series, but kind of just moving forward the end of the season here. But thanks again, Cory.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you.